Hello, legal eagles, luminaries in law, and general audience. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, we will be talking about secular and Islamic review in the Islamic Republic of Iran. We are joined by Dr. Ali Shirvani, who is a research fellow at the Middle Eastern Institute at Northwest University, Xi'an, in China. So, over to you, Dr. Shirvani. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, Dr. Abbasi, and thank you for inviting me. And hello to the audience. In the name of God, uh, I'm going to share my PPT and I will continue the topic. So now you have it, yeah?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, great. So, first, I go through a definition or introduction about the judicial review or legal review that we call it constitutional also review. And then I go to make a comparison between the constitutional review, judicial review, in general with the system which is going in Iran. We call it Islamic review. The judicial review is a process in most secular constitutional systems. Under such a process, executive and legislative actions are subject to review by the judiciary. A court normally, or an authority for judicial review, may invalidate any law passed through the legislator or any acts of the government, especially the head of the state or head of the government, and especially when the people have any complaint about that their rights has been uh, violated by such acts, or their constitutional rights has been violated by such legislation. So the process of judicial review is normally through the judiciary, and the philosophy behind is extracted from the separation of powers. There are different models of constitutional review in different systems like civil law or Islamic law systems. But the general idea behind that is separation of powers and checks and balance between the branches, three branches of the power. The judicial review checks the constitutionality of all regulations passed or the lower court decision through a judicial process. The famous type of the judicial review is called constitutional review, is the model we have it in now in Austrian system, in Austrian constitution, also in the German constitution. Both have the constitutional review that this institution is a part of the judiciary, and it is allowed to review the complaints of the people or the complaints from the other branches of the powers, and to see these acts or regulation passed through them is compatible with the constitution and its regulation or not. Sometimes these constitutional courts has also the power to directly address the parliament to, for example, amend this regulation, amend these actions, or change it. Like I think in India that they have the high court. Sometimes they address the government to change the law, or this law is, for example, is not constitutional, and then they have to change it. The other type is like the system we have in the United States, that the Supreme Court has the authority to stop the executive actions that uh, came from the office of the president, like we had it in the travel ban by Donald Trump when he signed the executive order to ban the Muslims or most majority Muslim countries that they cannot travel to the U.S. The court simply uh, stopped these executive action and provided in this stop that uh, this this order, this executive order, is not constitutional, or maybe it's against the constitution. The system in Iran is somehow very different. The system in Iran is basically on uh, the Islamic review. Uh, First, the philosophy in the constitution of Iran that it has not the separation of power, although it has three branches of the power, like the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive power. But all these three branches are under the leader's office, meaning that the leader has the higher authority and is the highest branch of power as the head of the state, and these three branches are not exactly in the same function or in the same line with the other branch with three branches in other secular constitutions. Uh, and the second one is that the system in Constitution of Iran for Islamic review and constitutional review is a part of the legislature. Although in other system or in most systems, the constitutional court is a part of the judiciary, in the Iranian constitution, the Guardian Council, which is the institution, the constitutional institution for the constitutional review and Islamic review, is a part of the legislature. There are many other differences in this regard that I go through, but first I would like to talk about the genesis and evolution of this idea of Islamic review. Iranian first constitution was promulgated in 1905, and then it had a supplementary document in 1906. At that time, they mostly copied the constitution from the Belgian constitution and French constitution. They didn't provide such a system to review the legislation or to review the laws or any act of the head of the state or head of the government. Meaning that, for example, if some people or a citizen had any complaint, there was no constitutional institution to go and address that. But at the same time, in 1906, the Islamic fuqaha, or we call it mujtahid, uh, they asked to put to design a system that if any laws pass through the parliament, it should be reviewed by five mujtahid of the time to see if they are compatible with the principles of Islam or not. This committee was designed in the constitution, but since the uh, challenges of World War One, World War Two, and the New Age and the Young Constitution, the committee never had convened. It was just for the first parliament. And this constitution from 1906 endured until 1979, when the Islamic Republic of Iran constitution has designed and passed through the referendum. In the current constitution, which is last from 1979, the constitutional institution for review of the laws is the Guardian Council. The Guardian Council is uh, made of 12 members. Six of them are the jurists, and six of them are fuqaha, and the system is uh, is not working as a court. They are actually an institution that the procedure is very different from judicial review. The six fuqaha are appointed by the leader directly, and the six jurists are indirectly also appointed, maybe by, we can say, by the leader, because the head of the judiciary will introduce 12 jurists to the parliament, depends on the number, sometimes six, and then the parliament will choose from them or will select from them. So actually, the jurists also are from appointed from the head of the judiciary and indirectly from the head of the state, which is the leader. So as you can see, the main difference starts here from first the separation of power, which is independence of power in the Islamic constitution. Second, about the check and balance, that the check and balance here does not have constitutional meaning, since the leader is the high power or the high authority, uh, while in the secular constitution, the head of the state is one of the branches, is part of the one of the branches. And the other difference we have here, that in the system that they have, they provide the constitutional court. They also provide uh, the judicial procedure. Like if somebody has a complaint, they can address the court, they can bring the complaints to the court. But in the Iranian system, the Guardian Council, there is no access for the citizens or the normal people. There is no judicial procedure that, for example, publish the procedure how they decide about constitutionality or Islamicity of any regulation. The other main difference between these systems is that the first issue that the Guardian Council is going to check is that the law passed through the legislation is compatible with Islam or not. If they pass this, then they can go to the next step. That the next step is the constitutionality of these these acts and whether they are in conflict with the constitution or not. There is also another difference, that any legislation or any legislative acts cannot be a law if the Guardian Council do not approve it. In other systems that they have the constitutional court, the legislative acts or the legislature just pass some regulations, pass some acts, and it's a law until the time that somebody has a complaint about that, and then they check the constitutionality of these laws. But in the Iranian system or in the Islamic ideological Shia system, any laws cannot be passed without the approval of the Guardian Council. Meaning that if, for example, the legislature pass any law, any acts, before it become to force or become its enforcement, the Guardian Council has to check whether it's against Islam or not, if passed, whether it's against the constitution or not. And if we continue the differences, that uh, the Guardian Council, let me share here the contrast. I here provided the example of the Austrian model, which represents the Hans Kelsen thought as a sample, which has many differences with the Iranian Guardian Council. On one side, the constitutional court's structure, functions, and methods have inspired many other constitutions and have been reproducing. The idea of the constitutional court is especially in Europe, in Asia. Now, countries like Taiwan has copied or has the same system of constitutional review, but the system provided in Iranian constitution, or as we call Shia constitution, Islamic review, has not any copies or has not any other reproduction in other countries in such an institution. This model of the Guardian Council has some similarities with the Constitutional Council of France, which provides a complex system of the review of laws. They provide administrative review and constitutional council. Constitutional council can check the legislation. It is similar to the Guardian Council as the members and the appointments, but at the same time, they have also another court, administrative court, which also the Iranian system provided. And uh, this administrative system has the authority just for the uh, secondary legislation by the government or by the uh, ministries. The other difference, as you can see in the picture here, the, in the top of the picture, there are six members, six Fuqaha members of the Guardian Council who are clergies and who are the jurisprudent legal expert in Islamic law. All of them are men, which can be the judge or which can be the expert who can review the Islamicity of any act of the parliament. And the bottom of the page, the bottom of the picture, the six legal experts who can review the constitutionality of the uh, acts of the legislator. But in other systems like in the Austrian one, uh, men and women can be judge of the system. If I want to conclude the uh, topic or the discussion here, that I could say that the Iranian model of constitutional law is actually, or in fact, is the Islamic review. What is important in this system is just uh, that the legislation should not be against the Islamic Sharia, and the people or the fuqaha who are in charge to recognize this or are the judge of the matter are appointed by the leader through a different philosophy, which is not separation of power, which is not the check and balance, and which is not the constitutionality. It's actually the ideology of the Shia Islamic review that only the Fuqaha can check or can recognize if a law is against uh, Islam, what they understand as Islam or not. And also, I want to mention that in the Iranian system, mm, I think I forgot that. It's okay now. I share the table with you, the floor with you if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Ali Shirvani. That was very, very interesting. If you may, I ask you to unshare your screen, and we can
Yeah.
have some questions. That was very interesting. I think you have nicely summarized your presentation in 3 points. Point number one is that the whole notion of separation of powers, which is embedded in modern constitutionalism, is not
mhm.
embraced in Iranian constitution system. Rather, the whole notion is based on this concept of wilayat faqih. So, where
Yes,
the guardianship of the jurist is basically the bedrock of the Iranian constitutional system, where
yes,
where the whole authority is actually vested in the jurist and the supreme leader, and then there is guardian council. So, but Ali, I just want to ask you that there is some semblance of at least separation, or at least there is some institutional structure. It's not a dictatorship of a caliph, or do you think that um, basically supreme leader is just like a caliph in whom political and religious and even military power is vested?
yes. Let me answer this question that the title of the country through this constitution is Islamic Republic, uh, meaning that the laws should be uh, compatible with Islam. But when we go through it, as you said, we have some uh, constitutional institution like the judiciary, like the legislature, and we have three branches, which may show that it is kind of constitutionalism. But in fact, in a in a total picture, or in the way that the powers or political powers are vested to the office of the leader, we can say it's somehow it is an Islamic state. It is an Islamic state, but the shape or the face is like a normal constitution, which works in the system of international law. For example, the office of the leader is equal to the head of the state with other system like we have in the United States. The head of the state is the president. So in Iran, the head of the state is the leader. The head of the government in Iran, in contrast, is the president. So when we call president in Iran, he is not equal to the president in the United States, because at the same time in the United States, the head of the state and the head of the government is only one person. In compare like to what we have in France, the head of the government is the prime minister, but in Iran is again the president. So when Iranian president goes out of the country and have international relations or establish any relations, actually he is going to do it under his permission, under the office of the leader's permission. When the foreign minister wants to talk or wants to sign a treaty with another country, he's not doing through the president, or he's not actually authorized by the president. He has his general permission from the office of the leader. So the institutions, the constitutional institutions we have in the Iranian system, they are very similar in the face or in the form with the normal understanding of Western constitution or secular constitution, but in fact it is working like an Islamic state, or as you said, maybe we can say the Wilayat Faqih or the Wali Faqih. The office works as Khalifa. The other thing I have to mention is the different meaning of the people. The definition of the people in secular system, the sovereignty belongs to the people, but in Iranian system, we don't have the uh, same or similar meaning of the people. They call it Ummah. So uh, the office of the leader or the Wali Faqih is the Imam, and is acting Imam, who is Imam of the Ummah. And Ummah is not, limited to the territory of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Ummah may cover any Muslim or any Shia in every place in the world. So the concept of Wali Faqih is something like Imam or Khalifa as you can see in the substance, but not in the form. I think if I answered the question, if we continue, we can discuss it more.
This is very interesting. So here, what I see as an outsider is that Iran is trying to basically combine both modern and Islamic institutional forms.
Right.
So Islamic concept of imama or ummah or wilayat faqih, and then the institutional structure of the state where there is difference between the head of the state and head of the government. So
Right.
this is very, very interesting a development that's happening, and I think now let's talk about very recent developments that have taken place in Iran, i.e., that you have new president in the Islamic Republic of Iran, and that
Mhm.
person happened to be the head of the judiciary. I mean, how is it possible? It's just really like my training in common law or my understanding of Anglo-American legal system, it's really I can't just make much sense of it. That how could a chief justice who's appointed by the state could run for election and then become president-elect while still being chief justice? Hey, where is judicial review? Will he have to review his own actions or what's going on in here? Please enlighten us.
Uh, yeah, uh, as I said, the judicial review in Iran is a part of the legislative is part of the legislative branch or the legislature. So the parliament and the guardian council are twins. The parliament cannot work or cannot run any judicial review or has not the authority for uh, review such thing without the guardian council. Now you mentioned the presidential election that the head of the judiciary, who is appointed by the leader, is now the president-elect. So there is no higher office than him himself or the office of the leader who can who can review or who can permit or not to permit such an incident. It's first time in the Iranian history, or we can say, to my knowledge, it's first time in the constitutional history that an appointed head of judiciary is the uh, now is at the same time is the head of the branch of the judiciary and now is the president elect of the system. Maybe we can justify this if it is possible, which I don't think so, but just uh, to clarify the point of view of my colleagues and scholars is that the office of the president in Iran is equal to the office of the head of the government. So uh, the head of the government is elected through this election, and he is maybe in this point of view, he is uh, in a lower level than the head of the judiciary. But in constitutional concept, in constitutional definition, the head of the president is the second highest level of the office which we have in the constitution. It provides that after the leader or after the office of the leader, the president has the highest authority. But as now you can see, maybe also we can justify this as this president-elect is not, in office yet, so he can at the same time be the head of the judiciary. The other things that I have to mention in this about this question is that before this election, the parliament passed a law that about the election that the candidate has to resign before the election at a certain time. So, for example, we had also in the candidates the head of the Central Bank of Iran who resigned from his office. But in this law, they uh, extracted the office of the head of the judiciary. So legally, by a law passed through the parliament and also approved by the Guardian Council, the head of judiciary has no commitment to resign for the election or before the election. And as now the office of the leader is not providing any complaints, it's okay. I mean, it's going on, but it's different from our understanding of constitutional topics or constitutional issues.
This is very interesting, purely from constitutional perspective, because the whole notion of Montesquieuan separation of powers is that if you vest too much power, either in one individual or institution, then that individual or institution will take full control and will not act for the collective welfare of the society. Do we
Mhm,
see this happening in Iran? So you had several presidents, you have several other leaders, but
mhm,
after the founder of Islamic Republic, Imam Khomeini, you have
mhm,
only one leader. I mean, people talk about Putin as being the largest serving um, head of the state, but here I mean, what's actually going on? We know that the supreme leader is actually appointed by by a particular council. So what is it? Is it like dictatorship of the supreme leader because the the president elect was the favorite of the supreme leader, and hence special legislation was passed just to make room for him?
in this point of view, I should say that it's actually the meaning of or the practical meaning of the Vilayat Faqih or Wali Faqih. Let me provide another example which is related to our topic about the judicial review and the secular review of laws. There is a practical doctrine or a constitutional practice that in important issues of the country, the leader orders a supreme or a higher institution to establish which a higher institution which is not constitutionally defined to solve the problem. It is in his power that he can order like executive order, which is the same as the executive order of the head of the state in the United States. The leader orders to establish a higher institution. For example, after the sanctions on the country from the U.S., the leader ordered a supreme economic council uh, to solve the problems made by the sanctions, and they can in their jurisdiction they can pass laws, they can pass orders or regulations. We can say in Persian they don't put the title of law on them, but actually they are provisions, they are regulations, and they have legal effects. That, for example, uh, the price of the gas has to go on to protect the system from the sanctions or to provide some income for the government. This regulation passed through a supreme or a high council, high economic council, which established by the order of the leader. In secular systems, if such an establishment has been provided, the constitutional council could review it whether it is constitutional or not. But this supreme council, supreme economic council, uh, has no chance to get reviewed either by the Guardian Council or either by the Parliament, since it's the executive order of the head of the states, and in the Constitution there is no definition or there is no authority for other institutions to review the executive orders of the leader. They call it in Sharia meaning hukm hukumati, means that the leader or office of the imam or office of the wali faqih has the authority to order for establishment or to do something like this, but these orders are exempted from the um, judicial review or even the Islamic review. The other example happened also at this time of Imam Khomeini. He also established several institutions like the institution who can provide regulation or provisions on the cultural issues. So cultural and also educational issues. So when there are regulations from this institution, the parliament has no authority to interfere. They cannot review this. Also, the Guardian Council cannot review this regulation. Now, these supreme councils, economic, educational, cultural, are growing. So the constitutional practice is that the office of the head of the state, office of the Wali Faqih, can establish partial legislator, or we have the system that the parliament is now very limited in the function, because each part of laws in culture, in economy, in education is acted by other councils which are under the head of the state. So as you can see, the form is similar to other constitutions, but the action substance is very different. I hope that I answered the question.
Yes, this is very interesting. Ali, I want to ask you that what I see is that there seems to be two sources of legitimacy for the Iranian constitutional system. One is this whole notion of wilayat faqih. So jurists represent the will of God, and then that's why you have this council of guardians, and then you have supreme leader. But you also have popular representation. That's why you have elections, even if there are lots of criticism that the whole process of screening of of the candidates, it is basically dictatorship of the supreme leader, because if you cannot elect the people you want to elect, but you are just giving a choice, so here's a list, you just choose amongst these. And so again, uh, embedding, kind of joining classical Islamic law, Sharia, with modern institutional structure. So to what extent Iranian experiment is, in your understanding, a success story? I mean, it has been now over 40 years that this system is going on. So what are Iranian people thinking? Do they think that the system is working effectively, and it will keep on operating in the way?
Uh, if I could say, uh, the system in the past 40 years has going to the higher level of Islamic State. I mean, the Islamic meaning, Islamic concept has a very stronger role since uh, the past 40 years. What we find as a republic in the first is now very different as what we have as the republic. Republic or Jomhur or the people uh, in the referendum, I think that at the 1979, the meaning was like the normal people, that the people like other people in other countries. But the understanding of the meaning of the people now is like what said before in the constitutions, and there was no notion about it until recent years, that the people here are Ummah. So Ummah in the understanding of legal experts in Guardian Council or in the assembly of experts who select the leader, Ummah should also follow the Imam. So this concept is not providing election uh, as what we understand as election in other countries. This is another type of election, we can say, and I cannot say about the people, but the diversity of the people and the understanding for the young scholars, young experts, and the one who are now at the age of 70 or 80 who actually did the revolution in 1979 is totally different. I mean, there are people who understand the same as the definition in the constitution that we should follow the imam and we should follow the wali faqih, and they have a high majority, we can say. Also, there are people that they think that the part republic should go, through the election and has the power to elect somebody as a president who maybe can be against the office of the leader, but in fact, the constitutional structure doesn't allow that. And this constitution and this constitutional practice, I can say, is exactly the same as it designed, and it is going to be in the second part is now the Islamic government. We had last year the second step. We had the office of the leader issued a policy. We call it the second step. Uh, that the second step means the step toward a hukuma Islami, meaning that there maybe uh, that what we have in Yemen or what we have in Lebanon or what we have in other Islamic states or other Islamic countries who has Shia, the understanding of Wilayat Faqih means that the leader is the leader for all of them, and there is no territory or there is no limited territory to Islamic Republic of Iran. As I have to explain it or clarify it more, the office of the leader also elected by the people in the constitution as it designed, but it's through two steps or it's indirect. The people elect the members of the assembly of experts, and then assembly of experts find or discovers the leader. Maybe two leaders, maybe three leaders. Uh, what I want to say is that the people indirectly uh, elect the leader. It's constitutionally defined, but the people directly elect the president. However, the leader who they indirectly elected has the highest power, but the one they elect directly has the lower power. So the conflicts are systematic and are going on until I don't know when, until uh, maybe it goes to harmonize. Like we can see now that the president-elect is one of the uh, person who is in favor of the fundamentalists in Iran and is not maybe the exact elected president of Iran, because the list was very limited, the list of the candidates. So if you had a list full of candidates, maybe the people or the republic could have a higher weight in regard with the Islamic part or in regard with the Imam or in regard with the Ummah. But this meaning or these sets are as designed, are working as designed in the Constitution. What I understand is that since the 40 years, since the past 40 years, since this Constitution endured 40 years and had just one amendment, maybe in the future we'll face an amendment by force, like something like revolution or something like a clash of powers, or it is going to amend and it is going to harmonize as more Islamic and more Islamic, similar to Islamic State.
This is a very interesting observation, Ali. So I see that again, this whole notion of Islam and institutional structure of modern liberal democracy operating, but still, it's the Islam that takes precedence.
Yes,
So, indirectly elected supreme leader is elected for life, but directly elected president has two terms limitation, right?
indeed. Yeah,
So,
yeah,
indirectly elected supreme leader has supreme powers, but
yeah,
directly elected president, as you mentioned, is lower in power. So you mentioned that there would be the change is required, as we saw that in 1989, after about 10 years, this
yeah.
Maslaha Council or the Welfare Council, Maslaha Nizam, for the protection of the system was established. And after that, we did not have any significant change. Do you think any change coming? And if yes, what kind of change that would be?
The change is needed and also is in the discussion. Uh, 4 years ago, the leader also mentioned that maybe we can amend the constitution so we can select the head of the government, which is now president, through the parliament. If the change happens in that type, it means that the office of the leader has more power than now, and uh, the people will be also limited. They have to choose their MPs, members of the parliament, and the members of the parliament who are listed by the Guardian Council also select the head of the government, who is the prime minister or whatever we can call it. So if these changes happens at uh, in this type, or I can say in such an amendment, it is going to be more Islamic State. But if it happens that the clash of powers, I mean the will of the people, uh, becomes stronger than the will of current government, maybe it would be a kind of revolution. But I don't think that Iran now or for a close future has the index of a revolution as we understand. But there should be a change. Uh, since this constitution hasn't been changed, this change would be a break in whatever way it happens, as a revolution or as an amendment. If it happens as a revolution, it would be a big change, a big break. If it happens, which is going to be a more secular, or which is going to be something like uh, Republic of Iran. But if it happens through the current government or through the office of the leader or through the system of or the constitution of Mali Faqih, it would be in the line with an Islamic State, which the head of the power is indirectly elected for the whole time, and also the head of the government is indirectly selected by the parliament, and the parliament itself is only a tool, an instrument to pass the laws that the government or the head of the state wants or head of the state wills. Since the other legislator is going to be acted by other institutions that Wali Faqih ordered to establish, so uh, we will see in the future maybe multiple legislature, which is not the bi-commercial like the Senate and the Parliament or the National Council, is different legislature in different fields. We will have only the Parliament who can select the Prime Minister or the head of the government, who can also impeach him. I mean, uh, there would be more limited on the constitutional understanding, on the constitutional topics, or on the constitutional institutions that we have in other parts of the world. In Iran, we will face a constitutional order which is going to limit the secular constitutional institutions and which is going to empower or which is going to strengthen the office of the Wali Faqih.
This seems to me very, very interesting observation that rather than relinquishing some power as a result of public dissatisfaction, there is actually a trend of increase in the power of supreme leader.
Mhm.
This is, from a constitutional perspective, quite a problematic trend. So, uh, and my understanding is that until unless you have a substitute theoretical foundation to theoretically to intellectually put some restrictions on the power of the supreme leader, maybe some new interpretation of this theory of wilayat faqih. At the end of the day, this was neither a theory that was completely and originally presented by Imam Khomeini. There were other versions of this theory. So there are multiple interpretations of this theory. So maybe as scholars and researchers and Iranian intellectuals, maybe they may work out some sort of solution rather than paving a way for complete change as it had happened with respect to in 1979, because there was no leeway, there was no institutional mechanism to reform, that the whole system had to be discarded. Do you
Yes.
think that the current regime is actually proceeding towards that way, or as you mentioned that, because this is my last point, power is not as much concentrated as it seems to us in Iranian system, because you have foundations, you have guardians, and then you have other militias, right? So, and then you
Yes.
have bazaar also. So the actual
Mhm.
distribution of power is much more complex than meets the eyes.
Uh, this uh, complex institution, all of them are working if and only if and only in the line of the Wali Faqih, meaning that, for example, that to give you an example, uh, if the president wants to select his minister, which is his right through the constitution, but this minister is the foreign minister, or this minister is the minister of the interior, or is the minister of the intelligence, he should first ask the opinion of the leader. Uh, this means that the president also, which is a constitutional institution, is not working properly or is not working in a same proportion that in a relative proportion that we understand. However, the trend of the amendment in Iran was also a controversial issue, that amendments to the past 100 years from the first constitution until now happened only by the consent of the head of the state, before by the king or Shah in 1989 by the consent of the Wali Faqih Imam Khomeini, although also it wasn't designed in the constitutions. They put a system of amendment which is very hard one, that only the leader can order um, uh, the establishment of the amendment council, or a council or a committee to amend the constitution. The trends of the amendments in Iran constitutional history shows that there would never be an amendment uh, until it is strengthening the power of the head of the state or something like that. This means that we will face a gap, that when we need to amend the constitution, it is a very challenging issue. So the scholars, the suggestion is that maybe we should harmonize the system so it works properly, because the system now is willing to work properly in favor of the Wali Faqih, But this constitutional system and this division of powers doesn't let uh, even Wali Faqih to work properly, or the president probably. The power is always in some kind of conflict, which is not uh, uh, productive. It's more like uh, not producing enough power to let the country run. So there are some suggestions from the scholars that if we harmonize the power in one of them, which is the leader, in favor, we harmonize the power in favor of the leader, uh, the result may work better than what we see now. The result may work much better than what we face now. And about the break or about something like a revolution, I can say that the system doesn't allow any conflict goes higher than a certain level. For example, we had 2 years ago we had some protests against the uh, gas price, which suddenly went up. But since the government, since the total government uh, uh, was afraid of that, they ordered a very harsh protection of the government, which resulted in many uh, of the people being killed in the street and the other things happened. But they justified, if a people or if one person wants to go against the Islamic Republic, as they understand, they call it Baghi. They call it that he is Mufsid fil Ard, and it's justified to execute him. So uh, there is no institution, there is no such a power who can right now who can be at the same level or at the uh, high power who can break this system. So I can guess this system will go on until it is harmonized or it is collapsed by itself. This is my perspective.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali Shirvani. I think this is very, very enlightening discussion. We are really grateful to you that you joined us at the forum of the Global Institute of Law, Oxford. Thank you very much, and we hope that we will interact in future.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Abbasi, for inviting me. And hope to we discuss more and look forward any comments and uh, notion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.